Hey everyone, welcome to this podcast called Ken Reads, where I can read out your letter that you've shared with me in the hopes that I can better help you understand what the F just happened between you and the last partner you were dating, whether it was in a relationship or a situationship. I look at these experiences from the lens of attachment theory. I don't just come up with thought terminating cliches like, they're just not that into you, or if they wanted to, they would. While some of those phrases might have their benefit in other dynamics, I try and look at this from the lens of, is there perhaps an insecure attachment issue that's at play in these particular dynamics? And though I am an Australian counsellor, I am not someone who is going to be responding to these letters as if I was with a client. I'm here to provide validation, yes, but I can't provide any diagnoses on these. So even if, a lot of people might understandably hear this and be like, well, that sounds like a narcissist. At best, I'll probably say, sounds a bit narky. I probably won't go any further than that out of respect to my ethical boundaries in regards to what I can and can't do. If you find this of benefit to you, fantastic. That's what I want. And if you want to submit your letter, you're very welcome to once there is obviously availability per month. And I'll happily read out and share my own 2 cents as to what I think has gone on in your dating experience to offer you a sense of validation for what you've been through and also to give other people listening a chance to feel like maybe this relates to what they've also experienced as part of collective healing. So, with that all out of the way, let's dive in to the latest letter.
Hi, everybody. This is Megan Brito from Ken Read Counseling, and today I'm going to be reading a letter that was submitted by one of our followers. Before I get into the letter, I'll just give a brief introduction about myself. As I shared, my name is Megan. I'm a team member with Ken Read Counseling, and I work as a coach part-time with Ken. I provide supports for individuals who are wanting to work on healing their own attachment styles, who are folks that have had a recent discard or a betrayal from somebody that had typically a really avoidant attachment style that they were in the relationship with that ended things abruptly, and helping them process that betrayal, grief, and help to move on from that relationship. Those are the main things that I focus on with Ken. And again, like I said, I do that part-time. And full-time, I am a registered social worker with the Ontario College of Social Workers and Social Service Workers. I provide addiction counseling to individuals in my rural Southwestern Ontario community. I specialize in process addictions or behavior addictions. And I also have worked many years in the field of domestic violence. So those are some things that I bring into the work that I do with Ken, and also how I like to approach supporting my clients in a coaching space as well. So that introduction out of the way, I will get into this letter reading. So this letter was submitted by a woman. We're going to call her Marie. This letter is a little bit on the longer side. I haven't looked at it yet. I'm very excited to get into it with you. So as I said, the submitter, her name, we're going to call her Marie, and she has asked that we call the individual that she was in the relationship with Vaughn. So that's what we're going to go with today. All right, so getting into this letter. It says, thank you so much and the team for all of the content. Your knowledge, manner of presenting these nuanced topics, and compassion have helped me tremendously. Here is my villain origin story. When I met Vaughn, I had been divorced for 5 years and was several months post-breakup from my prior boyfriend. I had been in therapy consistently for about 2 years with a trauma-informed therapist. On the first date with Vaughn, he oozed charm and kindness, and we spoke about several diverse and compelling topics. I felt major connections both intellectually and on values. He wasn't my normal type, but we instantly clicked. On the first date, he was curious about my kids. I told him how they were only recently starting to spend time with their father. Their dad is abusive physically and emotionally, and since this was only the first date, I told him that I would let him know later if we decided to continue to get to know each other. I think that's really fair. Marie, I think that was a good exercise of boundaries. And again, just a kind of that brief part that I mentioned of me working in domestic violence for many, many years. When individuals are getting back out and dating, wanting to form relationships again, we always encourage folks to, kind of just slowly dip your toes in the water. Don't present everything up front all at once, especially if you do not know this person you are going out on a date with. So I think you wanting to go in, and as you said, if we continue this with Vaughn, I'll tell you more. So I just really wanted to acknowledge that that was a really good exercise of helping to preserve your own, kind of sense of safety by exercising those boundaries. So 2 thumbs up from me. We took our time getting intimate, and he said things like, "I haven't been with a girl in over 8 months. I'm fine on my own and don't need someone in my life." Or, "I don't date a lot." In hindsight, he was projecting this image of who he wanted to be and not who he was. The first red flag when I asked about prior relationships was that he said none of the girls he dated had anything going on and they had to rely on him for everything. And he said that I was quote unquote different. Okay. So again, just this kind of first part of the letter, Marie, I can appreciate, our hindsight isn't 2020. You were working with the best information that you had at the time. So recognizing later that a red flag that stood out to you was regarding how he talked about relationships. "I don't really date a lot. I don't really need something in my life." I'm not faulting you in any way for continuing this relationship with Vaughn, and recognizing that, now, when you submitted this letter to me, now that now what you're working with, to keep that in mind and do better moving forward. So at the time, I can appreciate you didn't know, but now you do. All right, so continuing back with the letter. Early on, he launched into sharing information about his bio dad and how his mom effectively raised him and his four siblings on her own. They had very little money, and it sounded like it was a difficult childhood. Yeah, I can also agree to that. Vaughn never had a great relationship with his bio father, I'm assuming, who has now passed away. I was overwhelmed with having to hear so much about his story without really any kind of segue or warning. I wish I had absorbed more, but it was a lot for me to take in so early on. I think that's fair. I really think that's fair, Marie. And I know that if I was also in your shoes, I would also feel the same way. Meeting somebody, starting to get to know them, and then having really, really personal information just dumped on you in those, kind of early stages of dating, that's a lot. And especially, talking about having a background of experiencing domestic violence in a relationship, that's trauma that you're, holding on to. And I'm really glad that you were connecting with a trauma-informed therapist. I hope that working through the relationship you had with your ex-husband, that, was something you were working on just to feel like, right, you could move forward and not have this still, hold on to so much of your life. But when we have trauma that we still carry, it's very easy for us to almost check out or feel like we then can only take in so much before, checking out or almost disassociating. And that's a spectrum. So you only being able to take in so much and then feeling overwhelmed by it, that's normal. That's okay. Again, I know I wouldn't feel any different if I was in your shoes. So having that dumped on you, I would have the same reaction. I think that's very, very normal given the circumstances. Again, moving back into this letter, continues to say that, so he gave the impression that his daughter lived with him 50-50. However, as the relationship moved on, I discovered that the daughter, in fact, never spent so much as a night at his home when we were together. He had a decent explanation, but this was another red flag. After his first pullback, I communicated how his behavior was problematic for me. He responded that he is used to compartmentalizing everything in his life, including his work, daughter, family, and now me. I told him I understood how that was a good way to handle life stressors. I also made it very clear that I did not want to be compartmentalized and that this shutdown behavior wouldn't work for me. I regret that I failed miserably in forcing this boundary. Again, Marie, I'm not faulting you. And I know, as you said, I have regrets. This is how essentially it came to, bite me in the ass later on. Um, and I hear that you had this awareness of what was going on. And just in general, whether it's coaching, counseling, therapy, self, spiritual growth, whatever journey you're going through, we can have insight into our behaviors and have an understanding of where this is coming from. But if we feel like we don't have enough tools in our toolbox, or we don't know how to use some tools we have in our toolbox handy, we're not going to act in ways that we would like, or we're going to do things that feels like maybe push or push against or don't line up with our own boundaries or our own expectations or values or morals, be them in relationships or in life. And and again, I might be missing something, but this is just how I'm interpreting the information you gave me, where maybe there were tools that weren't there, or you had some, but you just didn't quite know how to use them. So, feeling like regret, or I saw these red flags. Again, I'm not sitting here faulting you for it, because there are reasons why you continue to move forward in this relationship. It was giving you something. So, again, now, so we still have much more of this letter to move through, but I really can appreciate, and I do have a lot of empathy for you as to why you continue to move forward, even if you saw red flags or kind of were aware of things that you needed, in this case, boundary wise, but couldn't enforce them. Okay, so after a couple months together, I was ready to tell my story about my kid's father. This discussion took a turn I didn't expect, where he dumped about a first wife and how she took his son from her and how she is quote unquote crazy. I didn't even get a chance to talk about my situation. However, I was honored that he felt comfortable being vulnerable. The relationship took a pattern of fantastic weekends spent together with intense chemistry, connection, and conversations, followed Vaughn pulling back with work being his primary excuse. At 6 months, and we had an idyllic trip to Mexico to celebrate his milestone birthday with two other couples. At this point, our conversations became much more superficial. However, on the trip, we did have some deeper dives. Prior to arriving in Mexico, I arranged for a chef and surprise mariachi band on his birthday night. Throughout the vacation, he mentioned how he wished that we had a kid together, and how, quote, open quote, he never wants to let me go, closed quote. After the holiday, after the holiday, apart from some breadcrumbing text, he was silent for 2.5 weeks. Okay. During this time, he blamed me for our lack of seeing each other, even though I had reached out to meet up. My approach was always to open it to dinner or something, but if he didn't respond, I would not follow up. He knew I was still there. After he started pulling back, whenever I asked if he wanted to do something, his response was often, "What did you have in mind?" So he's not initiating anything. He's putting that burden onto you, essentially. Um, so okay, I always thought I didn't have anything in mind, as we had no definitive date. It was as if he wanted me to make theoretical plans that he could reject, and then there's a kind of a question with that sentence. Also, at first, he had some very fun dates he made, but after that, I generally came up with ideas. It was almost as if he had a 1 to 2 month playbook and then he was finished. Okay, so I'm going to just take a pause here. Again, I know I've commented on a few things already throughout this letter, but um, some of the things, again, that are standing out to me when we look at it through the lens of attachment theory, um, that are starting to transpire as this relationship is progressing. I definitely hear avoidant tendencies showing up. And this was earlier in the letter that came up where Vaughn talked about his awareness of how he compartmentalizes things to get by. So just see if I can quickly go back to that part of the letter. Oh, okay. I know it's in here. It's on another page. I don't want to spend too much time trying to search for it, but oh, here we go. Right. So Vaughn shared that he compartmentalizes everything in his life. So work he compartmentalizes, his daughter he compartmentalizes, family he now compartmentalizes, and you. So that's something that sticks out to me. So when we talk about just in general, whether or not we're looking at this through the lens of attachment theory, compartmentalizing is something we all do. There's degrees of it. Some of it's healthier than others. When we look at folks that have a severe avoidant attachment style or fearful avoidant attachment style that leans dismissive, compartmentalizing is what they do to get by. Doesn't mean it's healthy, doesn't mean it's really okay. So when we are able to, in a healthy way, compartmentalize, that means that we have an overwhelming emotion. There is no such thing as a good or bad emotion. They are all there to serve a purpose for us. So, but they can feel overwhelming or painful, or distressing on some level. So when we have an emotion that comes up that brings us pain, distress, or overwhelm, and we can't regulate it, when we talk about regulating, it means we feel all of our emotions, including emotions like disappointment, guilt, shame, disgust, embarrassment, anger, anything like that. We regulate is that we feel it and we are not consumed by the emotion. We are not acting from an emotional place. We're not having the emotions dictate our thoughts or our actions. So when we are not able to regulate an emotion and it feels like it's so overwhelming, sometimes we do compartmentalize it so that we're able to just get through the day or get through a moment in a healthy way. For example, when I think about a breakup, maybe we're experiencing incredible amounts of anger or disappointment towards our ex that dumped us or just discarded us like we were nothing to them. And let's say there's a lot of anger present. I'll use that one. I'll use that emotion. So in a healthy way to compartmentalize, maybe when we go to work, we're able to literally set aside these feelings. We're not maybe focusing on the relationship, or again, the feelings aren't coming up because we're busy at work. We're doing our job. And then for a lot of folks, when their day is done and they either get in the car, or maybe they take public transit and then they walk in the front door, that's when the floodgates open up and those emotions start showing up. And whether it's crying or stewing about things or just wanting to just punch something or scream, or however the anger wants to be released. And a lot of times people could cry. That's really, really common. We feel that afterwards. So healthy compartmentalization is we have an emotion comes up that's so overwhelming for us. We literally, I tell my clients, it's like you round file it, you open up your cabinet, you stick it in a file folder that's labeled anger, you close it, and then you revisit it with it. You intentionally revisit it later on. And allowing yourself to process it and feel those feelings that come up, that's healthy compartmentalization. Sometimes we need to do that. But when it's unhealthy, and this is where we see a lot of the avoidant behaviors, is that they compartmentalize it and they don't revisit it. So we know, just going back to the example of anger, maybe they're feeling angry and upset about something. instead of just round filing it when they're at work. And then when they get in their car or they walk through the front door, allowing themselves to really feel and process it, they don't open up that filing cabinet. They just keep it shut. And it's this idea of, well, if I don't acknowledge it, it will go away. Or if it's not there, if I don't see it, it's going to be fine, when that will then show up in other ways. So that really stood out to me when we talk about, again, like these, his acknowledgement of compartmentalizing. So Marie, him compartmentalizing you is not you as this person who did something right or wrong, or is problematic or bothersome or overwhelming or painful. It's not you, it's the emotions that your being elicits within him. So maybe it's something like excitement and love and joy and care that can be overwhelming and he can't handle it. Or maybe it's something like frustration, or he's feeling disappointment or embarrassed or ashamed and he can't handle that. So that's also why he's compartmentalizing. So that really stands out to me. And I really wanted to spend time talking about this because I recognize I spent quite a bit of time talking about this idea of compartmentalization, because everybody that's really avoidant does it. And it's to just try and manage emotions. And when people hear that, again, it's not common, but sometimes somebody who's really avoidant will say, yeah, I compartmentalize you. I stick you in a file folder and I shut that cabinet door. It's not because you are too much. It's because they can't handle emotions. And and we feel so many emotions throughout the day. Things will trigger them. It's a part of life. And they can't deal with that. So that really stood out. I really wanted to spend some time talking about that and just recognizing that still doesn't mean it's okay. That still doesn't mean that's acceptable for him to do. And it's okay that that doesn't feel good. And you said, I don't want to be compartmentalized. I know I don't want to, that's basically saying, I can't deal with how you make me feel. And that's not your fault. And that goes for anybody that may have had, can relate to this particular experience. So that really stands out to me. And even earlier in the letter, when he talked about he doesn't really date much, he doesn't really need people, that also stands out to me. It's one thing to enjoy your own company, that matters a lot. But the idea of I don't quote unquote need people, or I don't date too much, that's something we hear a lot of avoidants say, because it's not that they don't need you. We actually do need people. It's healthy to lean into somebody emotionally, to feel supported, and vice versa. But if relationships or vulnerability or needing to depend on another person, especially when we're younger, is met with rejection, avoidance, being dismissed, ridiculed, or shamed, typically it's by a grown-up, we can internalize that as I don't matter, or I don't need people because, they're going to let me down anyway. So those are things I really hear are sticking out. And, this last bit here, Brie, when you said it's almost as if he had a 1 to 2 month playbook. And when he got to the end of that book, it's like he was finished. What I hear from that, and you can definitely look at it as a playbook. It's this idea of his own emotional capacity. He's basically maxed out. He's reached his threshold because he compartmentalizes, because he can't feel his feelings and struggles to communicate with you. He's not able to sustain the emotional resiliency needed and the communication skills needed to have a healthy and functional relationship. So maybe, and this is a spectrum that looks different for every avoidant relationship. Not all people that have an avoidant attachment style do this. If it's at a milder end, it can be very manageable, and that doesn't interfere, that compartmentalization and not being able to feel your feelings, or communicate what's going on for you. For some people that are severely avoided, like you, it's 1 to 2 months. For other people, it's one date. For some people, it's 5 to 6 months. For some people, it's a couple of years. So there are a lot of factors that happen, but it absolutely feels like, as you said, it's like they got to this end of this playbook. It's like they've run out of ideas. They don't know what to do. So, how the compartmentalization and poor ability to communicate shows up as it's like after a month or two, ran just gave up, couldn't do anything else. I think that's a great way to describe it. So if other people can relate to that, again, that's what's going on. So it's not easy. It's not okay. And being at the receiving end of that is such a taxing experience, and it can be incredibly hurtful as well. So getting back into the letter here, moving on, Marie says, after Mexico, we finally saw each other for a full day of mountain biking and a concert at a hot spring that Marie arranged. And it was such a strange vibe. He was going through the motions and made a big effort. He packed lunches and snacks for us. He drove a long distance, um, and he fixed my bike, but everything was way off. After the day, he continued to bail on the plans at very last minute and breadcrumb for another 3 weeks. My nervous system finally had enough. My gut looked over and I had to break it off. Sorry, my gut took over and I had to break it off. I was forced to do it over text. He had acted very surprised and blamed me for not sharing how I felt in person. I would have if he answered his phone or followed through on one of our planned dates. So I'll try to be brief with this. Marie, so, what I just read, again, what happened after Mexico, just wanting to go mountain biking, his behavior really changed. And it's like he tried to be more present and make an effort. So by doing the things like packing lunch, packing snacks, trying to fix your bike, he was able to do like tasks and be present physically, but emotionally couldn't do it. Just showing up and being there in the moment with you, enjoying the moment with you, couldn't do it. So that's right. I hear this big disconnect. And again, that makes sense why then you felt basically backed into this corner of having to break up with him via text, because leading up to this, what you talked about in the letter, he wasn't willing or able to sit down and do this emotionally. Like he couldn't be present with you. So yeah, it feels like you had to get back into a corner. And because you were texting, again, this is something, I don't 100%, confirm or deny, or, not really sure. But with that, when he said, like blaming you for not communicating this earlier, that's not your fault. He backed you into this corner of having to text. And I think because he felt okay to say it because it was over text and not face to face, he didn't feel maybe as vulnerable, and he was able to then project that and put it back onto you. Okay, so moving on, it says, I wish I had left it at that. Yeah, sorry. I wish I had left it at that. The whole situation during the pullbacks and then after the breakup made me feel anxious for the first time in my life. I'm really sorry, Marie. Okay. One of my girlfriends insisted that he had been sleeping with other people. The breadcrumbs pull back after amazing weekends. The mixed messages all just made no sense to me. I had later found out that he was on dating apps throughout our relationship and slept with at least 2 people. Ooh, okay. We are going to also come back to this. Again, for folks that are maybe a little bit newer to Ken Reed counseling, maybe haven't watched a lot of content produced or haven't watched content with myself, whether I'm with Ken or not, I always, always say this, and this is the hill I will die on. When you are in a relationship with somebody and it's monogamous, this is the agreed upon dynamic, and you go out of your way and you sleep with other people, you're going on dating apps, going, flirting, sleeping with other people, that is a choice that you are choosing to make, and that is not okay. So hearing that he did that, not okay. at the end of the day, that is always a choice. If he was doing this, he could have said, hey, Marie, I'm actually interested in seeing other people. Let's break this off. Have a nice life. What I enjoyed the time with you, something like that, right? Ending it and then moving on. But dating you, he chose to sleep with other people. That is not okay. Unfortunately, this is not for, I also want to make this very clear, not every avoidant person does this, but it's really common that avoidant people do that because it looks like things like sabotaging good relationships. They don't feel good about themselves, and how they are. So this is a way to sabotage, but also to get validation. They're seeking it externally. When we start to get emotionally close to somebody else, and this will happen, and this is what freaks out people with severe attachment woundings, starting to feel big feelings come up. And if that feels like it's too much, they will absolutely go ahead and sleep with people outside of this relationship, whether they go back to ex-partners, meet random people, have one night stands, whatever this looks like. They'll do it because they cannot handle the emotional intimacy that they are building in this new relationship. So, plethora of reasons why. Doesn't mean any of them are okay. I just sharing that to help put some context to this, but this is disgusting. This is not okay. And there's no good reason to validate or back it up. So I really want to preface that. I'm so sorry, Marie. I am so sorry. So continuing on with this, again, it says he may have even hooked up with my former best friend who insisted he was cheating. He was texting new matches during our birthday vacation. I was crushed as I kept thinking how when I was planning for his birthday celebration, he was active on dating apps. I suspect he is a sex addict, and there's a long list of women. I also think that he was not intimate with me at first, as he was in a relationship when he met me. On one of the other women told me that she had been seeing him on and off for 3.5 years and would move mountains for him and didn't care if he had a girlfriend. I spiraled comparing myself to these women. Yeah, I know I would do that too if I was in your shoes. Um, this was a wake-up call that I didn't want to just be another person in the rotation and needed to maintain some self-respect. Good for you. That's not easy to do. It's not an easy conclusion to come to. And as you said, this other woman said I'd move mountains for him and I didn't care if he was in a relationship. That's not okay. And when people, whether you're a man or a woman, know that you are seeing somebody that's in a relationship with another person and that person doesn't know, that says a lot about you. And I'm not saying that it's coming from like trying to be judging about this woman who said, I don't care if he's with somebody, I'm still going to sleep with him. That speaks to this person has a lot of their own issues they have to resolve, and the need to have a relationship with somebody, like kind of, like essentially engaging in cheating. What's going on for you to get you to this place? You need to talk to somebody. This isn't okay. So you, Marie, saying, I don't want to be part of this. I don't want to be, just another person in this revolving door of people he's sleeping with. That is such a hard place to move out of. And the amount of grieving and disappointment and anger and all these other emotions that come with it, that sometimes can keep people stuck in that revolving door and just being another person in that cycle. So again, we still have more of this letter to read. Just right now, I don't actually have enough information to say this person perhaps has a sex addiction. So if there is more information, I definitely will comment on it. But even if a sex addiction, let's say, isn't present, I may not, if I don't have enough information to kind of say like, possibly, maybe. When we are choosing to be in a relationship with somebody and we are, again, going behind their back and sleeping with other people and flirting with other people, that comes from a really, really low, a place of little to no self-esteem, no self being able to validate yourself, find worth in yourself, or feel like you're deserving of relationships with somebody who treats you well or is stable or is loving. That says again a lot about that person who is engaging in those cheating behaviors. So, okay. Um, yeah, so moving back into the letter, spending such effort during my crazy phase of hypervigilance resulted in a gold mine of information, but the discovery of betrayal sent me over the edge. Yeah, I don't blame you. I think that's a very normal response considering what's happened. After I found out about the women, I sent him a picture of me getting a blood test for STIs and asked him why he didn't break up with me if he wanted to be with other women. Even after sending him screenshots with the evidence, he deflected and brushed off any betrayal accusations and he never apologized. He accused me of being spooky for even investigating. Ooh, I hear some projection. Um, we'll get back to this as well, but or not projection, I'm sorry. Displacing his blame, avoiding accountability. That's what I meant to say instead of projection. So moving on, says we have boomerang number 1. 2 months later, he tried to come back. In our discussions, he asked why I never chased him when I was dating, which I found fascinating. My response was that I don't feel the need to chase someone I was in a relationship with. As a condition to give the relationship another try, I told him that we needed to talk about every time he cheated and what the trigger was. He responded that he wasn't interested, and that was that. Boomerang number 2. Another 3 months went by and he told me he had been completely on his own and gone to therapy. It says in parentheses here, I told him previously I thought he was a sex addict. Okay, so that was because, right, you put it in the letter here. So just kind of making it known that you also shared that with him. When we met for dinner, then a week later, went away for a weekend where he declared that he wanted to be with me for many years to come. During that weekend, we even met up with a couple that were friends with Vaughn that I adored. Throughout brunch, Vaughn referred to himself as and me as a we in several contexts. He talked about potential plans for this couple to join us for Thanksgiving for a beach holiday. I had never even discussed these plans with him. After that weekend, the old pattern repeated within 3 weeks of failed plans and breadcrumbs. One night, he asked if we could talk. The conversation turned into him berating me for showing him disrespect. Ooh, okay. The only thing I did was text him after he flaked on me, and I told him it was very inconsiderate behavior and I wouldn't even treat a casual friend that poorly. Good for you, Marie. Since the conversation turned into him just finding reasons to criticize me, I hung up on him. He texted me something about a mic drop and sent me a sweet playlist, but I was done. Boomerang number 3. 1 year, I said I think it was supposed to be 1 year and 8 months later. So this is fast forward to January of 2025. So January of this year. I had him blocked on everything I could think of, including Venmo. He reached out via text emails to my work email. We ended up having a 5-hour conversation where he told me he hadn't been dating in a year, had been to extensive therapy, and used various intense models of healing, including psilocybin retreats. He told me he thought about me every day and asked if I would let him love me. I confessed I loved him and thought about him every day as well, which pathetically I did. We had productive text and voice conversations with both of us, telling each other that we thought we went wrong and we concluded that there was a lot of communication problems. He offers to meet in person where all last-minute invitations I declined. He asked if he had acted with more intention if I would be willing to see him. I responded yes. After yet again, zero follow-through on meeting, he stated on text, let's just keep the past in the past. That's something very common for people that are avoidant will say. And that is a way so that you don't have to bring up what was talked, what happened, like talk about what happened, sorry. And when that when somebody does that, it's also to avoid feeling the guilt and shame about their actions. So that's a big red flag. Attachment theory or not, when somebody says that, and it's when people don't really want to talk about what happened or are not able to have a conversation and feeling like they can move forward, that's a big red flag of somebody who's not willing to take accountability because they can't sit in that guilt and shame. And that's what I'm hearing here in this letter. So moving back to this letter, it says, I was shattered and felt so betrayed, naive, and as if I self-abandoned all over again. It was almost like I had to go through this breakup another time, even though we never met in person. That's fair. That's very, very fair, Marie. After I did a quick social media search and discovered he had been in a relationship for over a year, his girlfriend had frequently posted about them together. Everything he told me over the 3 months was a complete lie. He even mentioned one of the trips that he had taken with his girlfriend, but said he went with his sister. That's ballsy. That is ballsy. So far, again, just up to this point, I don't quite have enough information to say he has a sex addiction, but what I can say, this can coincide with a sex addiction, or it can be something completely separate, is that this man with really severe attachment woundings is not able to spend any time with himself. And the only way he feels validated is to look for that outside of the relationship that he has with you or with any other person. So this man cannot be honest about if he's single or not. That and just the inability to just be okay with who he is and needs to have somebody else. And so his behavior, Marie, and obviously folks out here listening, again, not quite enough information to say sex addiction is present, but people who cannot be alone with themselves and have to just lie, constantly get that validation from other people, that itself is problematic on its own. That itself, sometimes, again, not enough information to say if it's like a love addiction, but it's so problematic that he has to be with other people and he has to cheat on women he's dating and he has to lie to just keep this going for him. So there is stuff going on, and I'm not quite sure if it's a sex addiction, but he has serious, serious concerns going on with his ability to just be okay with who he is. And to avoid that pain, it shows up as cheating and being in multiple relationships and lying about who he's with to just keep that going. So again, try to provide some context to it. Not okay, but that's what's going on. So again, moving through the letter, before the third boomerang, my personal growth was off the charts. I didn't date anyone to focus on my healing. I realized patterns in myself, increased the intensity of therapy, which included brain spotting, Reiki, and other somatic means. I even became a Reiki therapist. At work, I conquered challenges. I gained confidence speaking in public and was asked and said yes to be flown out to speak at conferences. I had to get rid of friends and feel like I developed into a better parent. I am humiliated that I slid backwards. Okay, kind of take a pause here. You talked about how much growth you've had. And for you, a big part of it was the somatic work. So Marie, I have no idea what part of the globe you're in. So I say that because, talking about a Reiki therapist, I know in North America, so Canada and the US, you can be, we call like Reiki masters, but when we talk about somebody who's like a therapist, these are folks that are clinically trained. We have background in like more of the I can't use my words, but like the psychotherapeutic modalities. So things like cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, emotion focused therapy. So so hearing that so what I hear from this is, again, it's maybe just part of the world that you live in. that's different from where I am. So what I hear is that, again, just how I would refer to it, because this is what I know based on where I live, is you are like part of like a spiritual healer. So you've gotten to a spiritual modality, and that's really, really helpful when we look at doing things like moving through trauma, wanting to help us heal. I come from a very clinical lens, very, I talked about like cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, emotion focused therapy, schema therapy, like, those modalities that we tend to think about when we see a counselor or a therapist. But I always encourage my clients, see me, we're gonna do this type of work. And then I'd love for you to go do things like yoga or Reiki, or other forms of exercise, or if there's spiritual groups, or if church is important to you, like organized religion, connect with those things, because those help to heal and feed areas of our soul that may and our own healing journey that get missed, or not get missed, but just don't get covered in the clinical work, and vice versa. So I hear how much extra work you've been doing, really focusing on those somatic pieces. And Marie, for you, it sounds like, again, that spiritual part of healing, when you talk about Reiki, brain spotting can be used clinically. I know therapists that use it, and other somatic forms of work. And that has helped you to conquer your challenges. But you said, I'm humiliated that I slid backwards. So I wanted to really highlight, you've put in a lot of work to help you heal, and you've chosen to then take your healing and move it into a profession, how you want to help people, how you want to spend your professional life and give back to others. You said you feel like you slid backwards. We can be the most brilliant, Reiki healers, therapists, coaches, counselors, psychologists. And at the end of the day, we're also still human beings. We're not going to be perfect. We're still going to slide. We can still slide back into things or feel like we're regressing. And it doesn't mean that you've like failed. Um, because again, I know you can feel humiliated by what happened, but I'm trying to just kind of offer you some grace in this experience too, of this was a human moment. And with that humiliation, I hope for you can feel like there's a learning moment out of it, and that you feel like you don't have to have this experience defy you, and you can still move forward, and that it's okay. And the amount of trauma that this man has caused you, you know, like it also can feel like if you're still kind of stuck in some of this, again, that makes sense. So I know you feel humiliated, but you don't have anything to be humiliated by, if that makes sense. So again, just kind of continuing with this letter, it says here, if not for this experience, I would never have done all this work and would be repeating the same patterns for life. I see how I was to blame in accepting this behavior. I still think about him frequently. I have even sent him texts in moments of weakness. It is the most traumatic thing I have been through, right? So that's why I keep, again, I'm reading this letter blind. I immediately picked up that there was a lot of trauma that this relationship gave you, and you are acknowledging it too. Um, uh, and as you said, you've been through a lot. Moving through a violent relationship, that's something I wouldn't wish on anybody. So you've been through a lot, and I can imagine other things in your life too. As you said, I've been through a lot, and this is the most traumatic thing. So again, moving on the letter, I lost both of my parents at a relatively young age. I survived an abusive marriage and a horrific 4.5-year divorce battle. I fought for my kids and have full custody. However, nothing prepared me for the horror of this relatively short-term relationship. Doing the work is a daily battle. When people mention the work, I didn't realize that just sitting in silence with the shit is so hard. Yes. And this is something I tell my clients. You have to sit in the shit. Sometimes I can't, and I can't help you move out of that, so to like, or not move out of it, but like, I can't make it easier for you sometimes. Sometimes we have to shit. I have to have you sit in that shit. And that's where you can continue to build that resiliency and growth and healing. And that's something you have to do on your own. So, moving forward, it says, I took up surfing and sitting in the water, waiting for the waves. I wanted every wave to be surfaceable. Oh, sorry, surfable, excuse me. It is hard to be patient and remember waves even come in waves. 100%. Yep. Having fought off repeated patterns of being with emotionally unavailable men, I am plodding along. I know I will always love parts of Vaughn, but he just does not have the capacity to love me like I deserve to be loved. So my big question is, based on your experience, why did these rebounds fizzle out so quickly? There seemed to be such a buildup, and then as soon as he saw me or reached a level of connection, it spontaneously ended. Most of the other Ken Reed's boomerangs seemed to last longer. So before, because Marie does ask a couple other questions, but just starting with this one. So when we think about boomerangs in terms of relationships, when we look at attachment styles or attachment theory, this is how I like to talk about this with my clients. And I talk about this in videos where it's come up. So with the first time a relationship ends, this person will then, okay, I feel better. And so by this person, I mean Vaughn, or that avoided partner. Oh, I feel relief. This is great. I don't have to worry about this person. And they continue to live life. Or again, sometimes they may have a person lined up, or they quickly get into another relationship. So they don't have to feel those feelings of grief. But eventually that will catch up to them. Or they will just be missing you. And that's when they come back around. And what they don't grasp, they literally cannot wrap their head around this idea of, right, I feel better when I come back around, unless I'm able to grieve and feel the feelings and acknowledge why the relationship ended. And 9 out of 10 times, it was mostly their doing. When they can acknowledge and sit with that, they think it's going to be different. There's very limited to no insight, depending on the severity of the attachment wounding, that these patterns are going to continue to repeat themselves until they process their feelings. So when Vaughn came back the second and the third time, I see it as being so short-lived, because when he saw you and you reconnected, he had all these feelings come bubbling back up that he didn't process. And these feelings can be things like love, excitement, elation, joy, excitement, like some anticipation, and maybe things like anxiety, shame, worry, fear, humiliation, embarrassment, guilt. And when they started to surface for him, because he compartmentalizes and he doesn't have the capacity to sit and process and feel, he runs. So I see this for Vaughn in particular, these big emotions that he can't sit with, that he needs to open up, the filing cabinet, like stick it in there, round file it. Those happen to have come up very quickly for him. And that's why he shut down, avoided accountability, misplaced that blame back onto you, and ran. So it's his ability to have those feelings come up, the lack of ability to process them, and doesn't mean it's okay, because it's not. But this is how he best knows how to manage them, stick them in a file cabinet, and just getting out. So that's a big reason why I see this as he just left and came so quickly. So I hope that helps to answer your question. Next question is, why did the third boomerang seem to be the most intense and I never met him face to face? Okay, so I think this is maybe all kind of part of one big question. Do you think his intention was to not follow through? And your thoughts on his intentions. So I do want to go back to what I first was talking about regarding why we see boomerangs happen and why they leave, because he can't process his feelings. He has a very, very shallow bandwidth to feel and manage feelings. So instead he files it and, files it away. Um, why the third time was so intense? I don't think it was so much anything different or special or unique that you did or didn't do, Marie. These these boomeranging experiences, yes, we can maybe say or do things that will influence how somebody feels. That's how that's how dynamics work. We say and do things that will influence and trigger feelings and emotions and thoughts and actions that can come up in another person. But what feelings come up, the intensity of them, how they act on it, why they act on it. Those are things that we don't get to control. That's within the other person. So, um, why it was so intense, even though you did meet face to face, that is an internal battle that Vaughn is going through. And that is an internal experience of struggling to feel, I think, lots of big feelings that were coming up for him. And I definitely think, considering his behavior, that looked into and called him out on or found out about. And again, I apologize if I'm a little bit murky with that, but I definitely see that there's probably a lot of guilt and shame that came up for him, maybe feeling like for him, he couldn't right this wrong that he did, couldn't see you face to face. And maybe the intensity was around the unpleasant feelings. Doesn't mean they're bad feelings, they're just unpleasant, of guilt and shame, disappointment, embarrassment, maybe, that he just didn't know how to deal with, didn't know what to do with them. So he couldn't, couldn't move forward with it. It was a short connection. Why are you going to connect with you face to face? I don't think he had this intention of not connecting with you face to face. I don't think he had a deliberate intention of not following through. It was somebody who felt so overwhelmed by emotions, he didn't know what to do with them. So he just, like, again, shut down and cut you off and was really ugly and messy and destructive in those processes. So I do think the intention was probably good, but he couldn't sit with his own emotions that came up and just couldn't end up facing you. So the why he did what he did and why he didn't do what he, didn't do things, is not because so much of like you and in your actions or how you chose to approach the situation. you know Finding out that this man was cheating on you all the time you were together, um that's that doesn't feel good for the person engaging in it and then maybe finding out about it. So um I think his intentions were to try to reconnect, but his emotions just got in the way. So again, I hope that helps to answer the question. So the last paragraph here, it says, I know that avoidants tend to go back for the affirmation. It hurts to think that I was just a person for affirmation. I would like to think he loved me, not so we can reunite, but to know I am not reading too much into it or that I'm crazy. It's also hard for me to think his current girlfriend is that quote unquote high stakes partner, and I am the quote unquote low stakes ex. This hurts my ego. I know I shouldn't compare, but her occupation is low level. Her social media exhibits very little depth, and physically it seems that she isn't someone he would be compatible with. It is also odd, as I live in a very small suburb distant from him, and she also lives there. I hate the idea of running into them, but also wonder if subconsciously that was a factor in him dating her. Thank you for your warm, thank you and your team for the nudges and reminders when I need them. Big appreciation to Tawny as she has coached me and is courageous, confident, sexy beast of a role model. I also agree. Tawny is an amazing woman. She's a powerhouse. And I am so glad that you are connecting with her and she's helping you to find your self-love and your self-confidence. That's what Tawny does best. If folks haven't checked out any of Tawny's work, she also has her own social media page, and she also does a little bit of that kind of part-time work with Ken. Tawny's amazing. So highly encourage you to look into her stuff more. And I want to talk a little bit about this last paragraph of, kind of the high stakes versus low stakes partner. And it makes sense, again, why you feel that way, why you see yourself as this low stakes partner, because again, this often, for most of us who go through these severe discards and just, this, in this case, cheating and not being able to be faithful and seeking that validation from other people outside the relationship, it absolutely makes sense why you feel like you're not enough. You are this low stakes partner, putting that quotations here. And as you said, this other person feels like she's not, cutting the mustard. She's really nothing to write home to mother about kind of idea. And with people that are severely, severely avoidant who do these discards and they find their new, these new relationships, they're often going to go for people that, don't, again, I feel like I'm going to sound judgy saying this. It's not my intention. But like, as you said, doesn't really have much going for her, doesn't really have like, a great job. It sounds like, physically there are some differences. Not that that has to merit weight in terms of somebody's, you know, uh, quality or like their worth. You said she's got very little depth to her. And people who are severely avoidant will actually thrive in relationships where they don't have to sacrifice much, where they don't have to get deep and intimate, where they don't have to feel like I can have like a really, I'm going to phrase it as successful relationship. And what I mean by success, it's not that people stay together, it's that both people can learn from each other and grow and thrive and connect and like support one another and show up and be there. That those things are incredibly threatening to people that have a really severe avoidant attachment. So they will find people where they can just stay surface level. They don't really have to go in depth, don't really care too much about the person that they're dating because that feels safe. If they will go with people where they feel like they can just, you know, if they left, whatever, not a big deal. So people in those dynamics, if that's this relationship, people with severe avoidant attachment, they don't say that, they love their partner and they can see them having children and having this big future like he did with you. And because he could see that and it was something that could be done well, that's what scares him. That's why it doesn't feel safe. So this woman really is actually low stakes and you are the one that's high stakes. And again, I'm not saying that to try to like butter you up or like fluff your feathers or blow smoke up your ass or however you want to look at this. I mean this sincerely. You had a lot to give. You had a lot of stuff you were working on. You really wanted to connect and he couldn't. So he will be with somebody that can't and who's pretty like kind of, boring, or you said not much depth, because that feels safe for him. So the relationships that are really long lasting, really sustainable are people that really enable the behaviors, don't really care. Or again, they just, they feel like I don't really have to get too close, too intimate. So it feels safe. It's okay for me to be in. So him kind of dating somebody in your same neighborhood, I actually don't really know if that was perhaps a factor, part of that subconscious factor. It could be, but I actually don't really know. And again, like not your fault, not enough information for me to kind of, you know, say more to that. But you are actually more of that high stakes partner, and that's why he feel like he couldn't engage with you, because he would have so much to lose. So I hope that's helpful. Again, I know that this letter was a little on the longer side, folks, but Marie, thank you so much for submitting your letter. And I do value and appreciate, I do feel really privileged that you asked for me to read this letter, and that you submitted this for others, for others to hear. So I hope that this was helpful. Marie, if you or if anybody listening has questions, wants to connect, you're more than welcome to reach out to me through our website. In my booking page, I do have my Ken Reid Counseling email. You can connect with me there. I don't really have like an Instagram account or a Facebook account. I just work with Ken. So the best way to reach is through that email. Or if folks want to leave comments, below, that's also, not a problem. And like I said, this was a privilege to read. Thank you so much. I I know Tawny is great at helping people find their self-confidence again and find that inner love. So I hope you're able to continue doing that work with Tawny, and I hope you continue to grow and heal. And I hope you never meet another Vaughn again. And if you do, you then feel empowered and you feel like know what you're needing to say no, but not having to let this relationship and this experience define you. So yeah, again, it was a pleasure reading it. Wherever you are in the world, I hope you have a good day. And yeah, and thanks for letting me read this. So take care, everybody. I'll be back.